Hello everybody, welcome back to another video by Jay Bowman. Today it's a bit of a different video. I'm going to take a very brief initial look at two relatively new synths that I've got. So on the left here I have the Kasser Synths DAFM or the DAFFM, and it's the Genesis version with the original Megadrive chip in there, so that's the YM2612. Which I think if I hold it up closer to the camera, you can see there. So I've had that a couple of weeks. Here I have the OPL Studio from Cheerful Electronics, and that actually arrived with me yesterday, so I haven't had much time with it, but what I wanted to do is talk about a kind of category of synths which I seem to have acquired quite a few of recently, which is portable tabletop 4-operator FM synths. So obviously these two are both 4-operator synths. As I say, the DAFM has the Megadrive chip in, the YM2612. OPL Studio has two OPL3 chips in it, which are 4-operator. I also have here the MegaFM Mark II from Twisted Electrons, and I have the Liven XFM from SonicWare as well. And I think the final synth I've got, which could probably fit into this category just about, is OPX4 on my MPC Live 2, which again is another 4-operator FM synth. And of course the MPC Live 2 is technically portable. It has a battery, it has a speaker, it's very large, but you can take it with you and use it as a self-contained unit. So I've been on this quest basically to get an FM synth which I can take away with me when I'm away from my studio and use and make music, do sound design on when I'm not here at home. And to that end I've acquired all these different synths. Now let's go through them. I'm just going to talk about each of them a little bit. Let's start with the MegaFM. I mean, technically this probably wouldn't count as a portable synth because it doesn't take battery power and you can't use a USB power bank with it. It's got a 12 volt input there. But having said that, it's very small and light and compact. There's things I really love about this. The sound is great. I was a bit worried when I got it that because it's the Mark II chip, which is cleaner and more updated than the original Megadrive chip, I thought it wouldn't have as much character possibly, but I can, if you've got any doubts about that, I've done a series of videos just exploring the sound of this synth on my channel. So if you're interested, it's worth going through those because I get some interesting sounds out of it. And I think, it's got a lot of character, even though it is the more modern chip. So one thing I love about it is the sound. I love the hands-on control for the 4 operators with these sliders. And I also like the fact that it's got 2 chips in it. So you have 12 voice polyphony in this mode here, Poly 12. You can also stack them, so you've got wide 6 where you have different left and right voices. So that's what I love about it. I love the size as well, it's pretty handy. There's some things which I don't find so great about it. I think the main thing is probably that even though you do have this hands-on control, some of the combinations for doing even quite basic things like linking LFOs to destinations, I'm sure if you use this all the time as your main synth, then you would get your head around it pretty quickly and it would be easy for you. But if I don't use this for a week or so and I come back to it, I have to remind myself, how do I actually just link an LFO to a parameter and tweak it? And once you do it, it's great because it's got quite a lot of flexibility in it. But I guess because of that flexibility, there are some hidden menu button combinations that you basically have to memorize or look up in the manual every time you need to to use them for doing that kind of thing. I would say that even without using the LFOs, even just using the 4 operators and the vibrato, which are very easy to use from the front panel, you can get some amazing sounds out of it. The other thing that I sometimes don't like about it, and this is a necessary consequence of the hands-on control nature, is that obviously you have all these sliders in place. When you come up with a new sound, you don't know whether or not they reflect the actual position of the parameter. And in fact, in most cases they don't. So you have to remember, you have to keep a kind of mental tally of what you've changed, what you haven't changed, which operators are sounding, which aren't, and which sliders actually represent the parameter value and which don't. And again, that's just a natural consequence of this. I think there is a mode on this where you can change it so that when you move a slider, move a fader, it doesn't actually change the value until you have a catch mode essentially. It doesn't change the value until you go past the saved value. So you could use that, I suppose, to see which value each slider's at. But I haven't really explored that. Again, that kind of defeats some of the hands-on nature. So those are a few comments on the MegaFM. The other thing I'm slightly on the fence about is that obviously these chips are multi-timbral, but the MegaFM is monotimbral. And in an ideal world, I do like multi-timbral synths, because I like, sound design. I like, the ideal thing is, doing live sound design while you're hearing the melody or the chord sequence which you've actually programmed out, because for me, sound design is part of the composition process. So that's probably enough waffling about the MegaFM. The Liven XFM, it's great in terms of portability. It takes, you can see it's actually quite a big unit compared to the size of the DAFM and the OPL Studio. It's bigger than both of those put together. It's considerably bigger than the MegaFM, but weighed against that, it does have this clicky keyboard, which is actually okay for doing sound design, for programming notes into a sequencer. I quite like this. I think it's a good compromise having this here. So yeah, that's a positive. It's got a speaker, built-in speaker, and headphones, full-size MIDI. It's great from that perspective. I think the package is really nice. There's some things I don't like about it. I don't like the fact that you have to use this separate overlay to get into the sound design features. I mean, maybe practically there's no way around it with the knobs that you've got, but it's a bit of a pain. Not just because of the overlay itself, but also because this kind of symbolizes the fact that there's this real division on this synth between sound design and the sequencer. So, I was saying earlier that I like the sound design to be part of the composition process on this. And the reason I don't use this synth that much is because there's these two very separate modes. There's, these sound design using the overlay, and then there's the sequencing. And they're completely separate. And I find it a bit of a shame. I think the actual FM in this sounds great. I've done one video on my channel which goes through, just a kind of simple sound design session. I think the feedback in particular that you get from this synth is amazing. It's got a really unpredictable, organic quality to it. It's a FM matrix synth, which is different from, the MegaFM, most of the other synths I've got here, because in a way it's more flexible, and you can really use that to get some really, as I say, unpredictable organic sounds out of it when you're feeding carriers back into modulators. It takes you to some really nice places. I don't know if there's any kind of special chips in this or if it's just software, but whatever they've done, they've made this sound great. And so yeah, for me, it's a shame that the kind of UI interface, it's just a bit of a barrier for me using this. It's also slightly unintuitive the way that there are no real LFOs for modulating parameters in a standard, in the way that you would generally understand LFOs. But what there are is, once you come out of sound design and get into the kind of the main mode, there are ways of transitioning between two patches, which in theory is a very powerful ability. But again, because it's not fluidly connected, I've just never got into that. So those are my comments on the XFM. And OPX4 I can't really show on the camera because of where my MPC Live is. I've done videos on that, comparing the sound of that to the Essence FM, for example. I have, in a way, that should be the ideal compromise, because I love the MPC sequencer, and it's got built-in speaker, headphone socket, built-in battery, etc. So even though it's quite large, it is all self-contained. Although in some ways you do need a portable MIDI keyboard with it as well. But there's just something about the sound of OPX4 that I've never quite gelled with. To me, it doesn't sound like traditional FM. I don't know what it is. Obviously the sound is very personal, but that's one negative point for me. And then another point is that the UI for me as well is just, there's just something about the way the screens are laid out, and having to jump between different screens to modulate envelopes, and it's a very personal thing. But for me, I just don't like the workflow or the sound particularly of the OPX4, so I've never really got on that well with it. So I've spoken about those three. Now these are the two newest synths that I've got. Now neither of these have built-in batteries, unlike the XFM, but they do both take USB power, which means it's quite easy to power them on the go. So let me talk about the DAFM first of all, from Kasser Synths. So one of the reasons I wanted to make this video is because there's very little content online about these two synths. Obviously they're from smaller manufacturers. I bought both of these synths on Tindy. And as I was looking into getting them, I watched, I was trying to get as much information as I could about them, and there's relatively little out there, so I thought it might be useful for people just to talk through my experiences. I mean, it's early days for me with both synths, but let's have a look. So when I first got the DAFM out of its box, I was very impressed, I have to say, by the way it looks. I think the photos on Kasser Synths website and on Tindy don't really do it justice. I think when you get it in your hands, it's quite basic, but it's very nicely put together. It's very attractive. I love the fact that you can see the chip there through this kind of clear plastic display. That's great. I mean, obviously this is the reason why you get this kind of synth, so having it there, that's perfect. I like the fact that it's got a little touch strip keyboard. I mean, you're never going to play anything detailed on this, obviously, but it is possible to just take a USB power bank, a pair of headphones, and this, and do sound design, self-contained, and just, all you need is just to hear what the notes are going to sound like. So that is great. Let me turn it on. So in terms of, the hardware, you've got these two knobs. They're kind of stepped encoders, and they feel wonderful, actually. Yeah, I mean, again, none of this really comes through from the website or photos, but I would say it's tactile in terms of looks and, feeling, haptics. It's great. So you've got an SD card slot here at the front. It doesn't come with an SD card, but obviously you can get one pretty easily and put it in for patch storage, etc. It's got a full-size MIDI DIN at the back there. I've got a cable plugged in so you can see that. It's got a kind of stereo audio out with a headphone jack combination. So that's what you use for getting the sound out. And then it takes this USB, it's like the printer cable USB, which I like because it feels quite secure. when you get in there, unlike other USB cables. It's got these nice 4 rubber feet on the bottom, which means it feels nice when you put it on a table. It doesn't wobble or anything. So, oh yeah, and obviously it's got this combination of volume and power knob on the back there. So let me turn it on, and there you can see the way that the UI works. You've got these four screens. So when I was first looking at getting this, I wasn't sure, is this going to work? How is it work? Is it going to work? Is it confusing, etc.? I have to say, after a couple of weeks, you quite quickly get your head around it, how it works. So you've got 2 knobs, obviously. The right knob just goes through the menus, which are set out on the screens. If you want to edit a parameter, you click the knob. So these are clickable stepped encoders. So here I'm changing. So so by clicking the knob, I've selected the first level of the menu. So I have 2 options here to change. The one on the left is feedback. The one on the right is the algorithm. You probably can't see that on the camera, but I'll say it's quite clear in looking at it with my eyes. So if you turn the right knob, you change the algorithm, and obviously you get the feedback on the screen showing you what's changing. And if you turn the left knob, you can see it's changing the amount of feedback. And again, that's quite clear. So once you've done that, you've made your selection, you either click the left knob to cancel what you've done, or if I wanted to confirm it, I'd click the right knob, which would confirm my choices, and then again you can change option. Now, sometimes when you move to an option like here, so the first menu option is feedback algorithm, which obviously I showed you how that works. If I turn the right knob, I'm on the next option. There's a little triangle here, which again you might not be able to see on the camera, but it's just about visible. And that shows I'm on the next menu option, which is velocity. So if I turn the right knob, it moves me on to the next option. So each operator has a velocity setting. So if I want to change the velocity setting for operator 1, I would click the right knob here and I'd turn it on or off. If I want to change the velocity setting for one of the other operators, I step through the options using the left knob. So that's basically what the left knob is used for, is through stepping through the different operators in the menu. So that's the first screen that lets you choose algorithm, velocity settings, and feedback. Second menu lets you choose the detune amount and the ratio. Third screen is the envelopes and the key scaling here as well, which is the little number on the right. Now I will say that this is one of my least favorites of the menu options, because it looks like a standard ADSR envelope shape from the way that it's set out. But obviously the Megadrive, the YM2612, it's not ADSR, because there's also a kind of sustain decay setting as well. So I think the way the envelopes are set out or visualized here is actually slightly misleading. So yeah, as I say, this is not my favorite of the menus, and it does make editing the operator's envelopes slightly counterintuitive. The other thing that is not ideal, and again, I don't know if there's any way that this can be changed in the UI as it is currently, is that there's no way to copy and paste from one to another. Obviously you can't do that on the MegaFM or the other. Okay, in fact, I think you can't do it on the MPC, OPX4, or the XFM, or the MegaFM, but it's something I miss from my Essence FM, being able to copy and paste from one envelope to another is really helpful in FM sound design. And I think that is something you can do on the OPL Studio, although I haven't really got to grips with this enough to verify that, but I think you can, because I have seen there is a copy button, which I'll get onto later. So this is the envelope setting. Next you have the LFO setting. So you have a global LFO speed, you have a single LFO essentially, and you can set whether that affects all the operators or none in terms of vibrato. And you only have quite a limited number of parameters. Let me show you. So if I click here, so the left knob is turning LFO off or on in terms of vibrato. The right knob is changing the frequency of the vibrato, as in the amount of modulation in hertz. Sorry, yeah, the frequency of the LFO in hertz. So you've only got how many? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, you've got eight settings there. And they're quite characterful. They do work, but you might want to have more choice in vibrato than that. For example, I think on the MegaFM you've got more options in terms of vibrato speed than you have here. Then you've got this option, which is the amount of the FM in cents. It goes up to 80 cents, and the minimum is 3.4. And then you've got amplitude modulation. Now here it's a bit different, because you can choose for each operator whether or not that affects it. And there's a set amount which applies to all operators, but you can choose for each operator whether it's on or off. So there I've turned it on for operator 1. If I use the left knob now, that takes me to operator 2. I can turn that on, off, on, okay. And if I push the left knob, that takes me out of that. So here are the special envelope settings, which you can set for each operator. There you can see I'm clicking between the 4 operators, which is great. And you've got some options there. That is helpful. I think that feeds into part of the character of the Megadrive. So this is the last screen, and this is probably my biggest negative point about this synth. This is the screen for loading and saving patches. So you've got 2 screens here with this SD card symbol, and then you've got these kind of hexagonal blocks in the top left and top right screens. Now in theory it's possible to load a set of load patches. You load a set of 6 patches. There's 6 voice synth, there's 6 patches. You can load 1 patch to each of MIDI channels 1 to 6, and this top left screen lets you choose which of the patches, which of the 6 patches you are using, and then you can use this screen to allocate that to a MIDI channel, and then you can use this screen to load a set of 6 patches, and this screen to save all 6 voices. I have to say that I appreciate the design, the visual, the hexagonal blocks, it fits in with the keyboards there, but I have to say this is quite counterintuitive. It's not easy to understand, and I think given that you've got 4 screens, you've got the ability to display numbers and text, there must be a more straightforward and clear way of allowing the user to load patches, save patches. So I think that's probably my biggest issue with that. Linked to that is the fact that you have 2 banks of saved presets. You have bank 0, which are the default presets from Megadrive video games, and there's a selection there which are great actually. and then bank 1 is the presets that you save yourself. But there's no way from the synth itself, from loading these patches, there's no way to load these patches into the synth. You need to send MIDI CC messages, program change, bank change messages to the synth to do that. Now again, on a synth like this, which can display numbers and text and 2 knobs, it should be possible. Again, maybe there's a technical reason why this can't be done and you need to send MIDI CC messages, but it should be possible from the synth to load up patches from the banks rather than having to resort. I use my MPC and I have to set up a preset that allows me to change programs, change banks by sending a CC message to the synth, but it's a bit of a convoluted way. It shouldn't really be necessary from my understanding. But again, I'm not technical, so there might be some kind of reason why it has to be done that way. But that's a kind of broad overview of the DAFM. I think it sounds great. This is a bit of a weird video. I don't think I'm going to do any sound demonstrations. I just want to talk about the kind of hardware at this stage, and maybe I'll do a separate video with sound demonstrations. But yeah, so that's the Kasser Synths DAFM. I'm now going to take, and as I say, I've had this a couple of weeks. I'm now going to take a look at the OPL Studio. So that's the next part of the video. Okay, now I'm going to look at the OPL Studio from Cheerful Electronics. And this only arrived yesterday, so I've had a lot less experience with it, a lot less time to program it and get used to it than the DAFM. So this part of the video is probably going to be shorter. Hopefully it'll be shorter. And obviously I can't speak from personal experience that much about the programming, but it's more of a first impressions, to be honest. So again, I was pleasantly surprised when I opened the package. It's well packaged. It looks pretty good. It's a little bit bigger. The OPL Studio is a little bit bigger than the DAFM. I'd say the DAFM looks more kind of badass, whereas the OPL Studio looks more cheerful. It's probably a good way of describing it. So what have we got here in terms of hardware? We've got this touchscreen, which I haven't taken the cover off yet. I'm still debating with myself whether I'm going to do that or not. Then you've got 2 stepped encoders, endless encoders. You've got A and B for changing parameters. You've got a volume knob. Here you've got a holder for a little stylus for using the touchscreen, which is necessary, and I'll get into that in a bit. Then on the front panel, so on this side, you've got CV ins. You've got these 3 LEDs for power, MIDI, and the SD card. I haven't formatted and loaded up an SD card yet, so I can't really talk about that at the moment. Then you've got a power button here on the side. In terms of power, it takes a micro USB cable, which is probably not ideal. I mean, they don't feel as sturdy as the printer cable that the DAFM uses, for example. And they're getting to be a bit old-fashioned now. But, everyone's got a few of these lying around the house probably, so it's not the end of the world. I have found that I've got quite a lot of USB noise and hum when I tried to power the OPL Studio from my laptop port, which I suppose is to be expected, but also from my MPC Live USB port, which is a bit surprising because I'm using the same port to power the DAFM and I don't get nearly as much USB noise with that. I don't know if it's the cable I'm using or what, but I did find that by using a USB power bank, which I've got here, you can see on the screen, that's eliminated almost completely the USB noise. So that's probably what I'll be doing in future, unless I can find a different alternative of powering it from the mains. So on the back here, you've got full-size MIDI DIN in and out, which is great. You've got the SD card slot there. You've got 2 audio outs, one's for line out and one's for powered speaker. It's slightly unusual, but that's fine. And then turning it on, you can see there the screen. And, you know, whereas the DAFM has a very unique, specialized aesthetic about it, for OPL Studio, they've gone almost the opposite approach. It's a kind of very 90s Windows kind of tile setup with menus. And in a way, I really like this. I think one of the points I should have made about the DAFM actually is that overall, the user interface, it's pretty, and you can get make your way around it pretty quickly once you get used to it. But I heard Manny Fernandez, who goes by Dr. Synth, who's a bit of an FM legend, talk on a podcast about what his ideal UI would be for an FM synth. And in his view, it would be just a spreadsheet with the numbers that you can amend. Because I think when you're a beginner, it's helpful to see the kind of the envelope set out in that visual way. But once you get a bit of experience, it's more convenient just to see the numbers, so you can see instantly whether one operator is the same as the other operator. On the DAFM, it's quite difficult to tell for any particular operator if the total level is at 63 or 62 or 61. And what you'll realize with the chip from the Megadrive, that it actually makes a big difference to the sound in terms of distortion, etc., whether the total level is at 63, 62, 61 or 55 or whatever, which might not be, you can't tell the difference looking at it visually, but obviously seeing the numbers, you can. So that's a bit of a long-winded way of getting around to a point which I'd like to make possibly to the maker of the DAFM. I think for some people, this current UI with the displays and the shapes, etc., I think that's probably perfect for some people. It would be interesting if you could have an alternative firmware, which is just, you know, a very basic column of numbers, and that would probably be my preferred UI. Just go to a parameter, change the number with the knobs, which feel great, go to the next parameter, etc. Whereas at the moment, especially in the envelopes, you've got settings for left knob and right knob, and it's just not as intuitive. Anyway, back to OPL Studio. So I like, in theory, I like this layout. I think it's great. What I would say is that these tiles are the tiles and the text are slightly on the small side. And with my eyesight, I do, you know, if this is at table level and I'm up here, I do struggle slightly to read these. So I don't know if the maker could introduce a kind of older person's setting for people whose eyesight is not quite as strong anymore, to make the tiles and the text larger. That would be ideal. As it is, you know, for me, from my ideal perspective, I'd probably have the synth up here compared to where I can see it, compared to my, you know, my eye line, so I can see and manipulate everything. If it's down here on the table, I've got no chance. So that's one point. So let's see if I can refocus the camera up here. I don't know how well this is going to come out on the screen. If I reduce the brightness, maybe that might help there. Okay. So there's lots of different options here. You've got a mixer, because this is 16-part multi-timbral, which is great. That's one of the reasons why I got it, because I love, as I say earlier, multi-timbral synths. You've got a melody sequencer. Sorry, I'll just go through the options. So I'm using the stylus to click the touchscreen. So mixer, you've got your 16 voices, and you can pan each hard left, hard right, or in the middle. You've got melody sequencer, which I've not dug into yet, but it looks pretty straightforward. Yeah. A drum sequencer, which I have used actually, and it's quite intuitive. Again, I'm not going to do any sounds on this video, so I won't get into that, but yeah, I have used it and it's quite easy to use. Patch editor, now that is the bit that interests me the most. So here, this is closer to my ideal layout. You have the preset, the patch name there. You can change what type it is, 4-op, 2-op, dual 2-op. Effects. Okay, so you can either be editing the operator or editing effects. Now, again, I haven't got into editing effects yet, so I can't really talk about that. So the next level, you can edit the feedback, transpose, fine tune. So that's on a voice level. That's interesting. So the fine tune is at a voice level rather than operator level. I'm assuming this is one of the characteristics of the OPL3 chip rather than Cheerful Electronics take on it. So here at the bottom half, you've got settings for operator 1, operator 2, operator 3, operator 4. Now, one of the reasons I got this was because I got quite interested in the Twisted Electrons TwistFM synth, which is based around the same chip, of which there are 2 in this synth, so the OPL3 chip. Of course, the TwistFM has analog filters, so that's an advantage from its perspective. But the OPL Studio, as I say, is 16-part multi-timbral. It has 2 chips in it, and I actually, in a way, I prefer this editing system to the TwistFM, MegaFM system. I mean, it's not as great for live tweaking, obviously, but in terms of coming up with sounds, I think it's, and being able to see where each parameter is, it's ideal. You know, hopefully that's coming through on the screen if I go through each of the operators there. You can see it sets out, you know, what waveform you're using. It has got a visual representation of the envelope there, but it also sets out numerically attack, decay, sustain, release, vibrato, tremolo, key scale level, frequency multiplier, so that's the ratio. It's got all the information you need there. And I thought I saw somewhere that it had a copy function, but maybe I imagined that. Anyway, if you can see the numbers, then it's not quite such a chore to get. So you can copy patch. So yeah, so I clicked on that option. Again, I don't know if you'll be able to see that because the type's so small, but there's an edit button there at the bottom. I push that and it's got copy operator and paste, which is great. So you can copy and paste operators. Okay, so that's the patch editor. You've got synthesizer setup, so that's for setting up CC options, I think, as well as CV. Then you've got composer, which I think is for, it's like a sequencer composer. I think that is where you, it's like song mode, I guess, on the MPC, where you put your sequences in order. I'm assuming that's the case. I haven't used it yet. Accessories. Okay, so you've got keyboard, live sequencer, media player, settings, session manager. This is like a file tree display. Maybe this is for, yeah, loading and saving patches, etc. So yeah, I really need to get to grips with the OPL Studio more. I can already say that one of the things I'll be probably speaking to Martin Janssens at Cheerful Electronics about is whether there is a possibility of having a different UI for people whose eyesight isn't as great. I mean, I should probably take the screen protector off and just see if that makes a difference. It doesn't make a huge difference in terms of visibility. It is slightly better though, because there's less reflection. Maybe you can see that. Yeah. But if there's a way of just making the numbers bigger, less dead space, bigger numbers, bigger text, would be great from my perspective. If there's a way of doing that without being too much extra work. And yeah. So that's probably all I'm going to say about these synths. As I say, I've had the DAFM a couple of weeks now, and I've done quite a bit of programming on it. I've had the OPL Studio for less than a day now, but if anyone's got any questions, just please leave me a comment and I'll see what I can do about getting back to you. I probably will do some sound videos with both the DAFM and the OPL Studio. They both sound great. I only had, a few hours playing with the OPL Studio last night, but it is great. I've been listening a lot to some of those old PC ad-lib soundtracks, like the one for Dune 2, Monkey Island, etc. And they sound great. And this has got that sound qualities to it, I can tell already. It's also got the same sound characteristics as the TwistFM, from what I can tell, apart from it doesn't have the analog filter. So in a way, it's great that you're getting that sound quality in a much less expensive package, which also has some advantages in terms of multi-timbrality and features. The DAFM also sounds amazing. It's got that Megadrive flavor. It actually does sound quite high quality, which is it's surprising actually. I mean, I'd say both synths from small manufacturers, these feel like quality products, and I'm quite impressed. And I really, as I say, with the DFM, when I got it out of the box, I was really impressed, and even more so when I turned it on and I saw how cool these screens look. Yeah, I think with a few tweaks, making loading and saving of patches easier, and maybe tweaking the UI in some other ways to make changing the envelopes easier, this would be a really great synth. And I'm hoping that when I dive into the OPL Studio, it'll be similar. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now. Thanks very much for watching. Please give me a like and a subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. Goodbye.